So FNAF Ruin, the follow-up to Security Breach, which shows us what happens after the incident that took place with Gregory at the Pizzaplex. And we get a new character here whose name is Cassie, and she appears to be a friend of Gregory's who has been summoned to the Pizzaplex by a message from him. And the first thing we notice is that this is definitely post-Security Breach, as the Pizzaplex is shut down. And as we see from the newspapers covering the front window, it appears that the media attribute this to an earthquake shaking the area, which causes massive structural damage within the Pizzaplex. Now, based on the available evidence that we have, it's entirely possible that this is just the cover story and that something else is in fact responsible for the collapse. Once inside, Cassie would discover a walkie-talkie which has what we presume to be Gregory, but we later discover is in fact the Mimic, which is attempting to lure her down in order to release it from its prison under Roxy Raceway. And we can tell straight off the bat this is the Mimic based on the evidence that we have gathered through the Tales of the Pizzaplex books, as they reveal to us that one of the Mimic's techniques for luring in victims is to use a radio. We uncover a Faz wrench, which reveals to us that Cassie's father is in actual fact a technician who works for Fazbear's. And then as she proceeds into the facility, we discover that there is something that randomly darts past in the stairwell, which has been discovered is in actual fact the Blob. So we know that certain elements of the Bumtrap ending are in fact canon. The Blob does exist, and it did exist under the Pizzaplex presumably, and now it is within the main lobby area, and so it has escaped from its confinement down below. And based on what we see in the Bumtrap ending's final cutscene, it's entirely possible that those events in some way did occur, as the building appears to start collapsing when the Blob takes Bumtrap, and we do know that it supposedly was an earthquake which destroyed the Pizzaplex, and so perhaps it was in fact the Blob tunneling out which caused the Pizzaplex to collapse, and then it was covered up as an earthquake. This does raise the question as to how long has passed since the events of Security Breach, and whether or not the actual Burntrap ending occurs or a similar event occurs at some point later on in the timeline, as we do see that a lot of the technology that we see in Ruin is pretty advanced seeming, and we didn't see any record of it in Security Breach, so it is impossible that time has passed significantly since then. After Monty scares her and throws her down a pipe, Cassie would end up in the Monty Golf area and then proceeds to try and make her way to Roxy Raceway. Now in this area, she is given the Vanny mask by a robot, and interestingly enough, we never actually see this mask in Security Breach, because Vanny clearly is wearing a fabric costume that is not including this mask as part of the head, so it is debatable whether or not this mask actually existed before Ruin. However, it does appear to be the exact same mask that we see in Help Wanted, specifically in Dreadbear, and also in the trailer for Security Breach. The fact that Cassie also doesn't recognise the mask implies to us that, at least to Cassie, Vanny was not common knowledge within the Pizzaplex, so she was never actually discovered by the company. And I strongly believe that the events of the freeing Vanny ending do occur in the timeline, and at some point after that ending, Gregory and Vanessa would return to the Pizzaplex and set up this mask as part of their systems that they are setting up to contain the Mimic. Now, the mask appears to inject software and components into the actual brain of the user in order to link them to some kind of network, and allows the AI system to communicate with them. And interestingly enough, it appears in the form of Helpy, and as we see, because there's an implant now within Cassie, the AI can appear in her field of view in real world without the mask on. So literally nothing that we see without the mask on can be trusted to be real, the same as when we have the mask on. So certain objects that appear to vanish completely when we put on the mask may in actual fact not be there in reality and are just all part of the illusions that are being manifested by the implant, or even possibly by illusion discs or other such technology created by Vanessa in order to confuse or distract anyone attempting to go in and disable the nodes. It appears, however, that the Mimic has corrupted the Vanny system, as whenever we see Helpy switch from blue eyes to the one with orange eyes and creepy veins along the side of his head, this is in actual fact the Mimic taking control, and it even gives itself away in this point as it uses Cassie's voice for a voice lure after mimicking her voice. It is entirely possible that they foresaw that the Mimic would attempt this, and so the Mix's system was created, which when in use in VR appears as a sort of rabbit ghost monster which hunts down anyone attempting to disable the security to try and stop them. And interestingly enough, it is also noted that it summons the animatronics to come and aid it in preventing someone from disabling security. It is at this point that we get warnings of an unknown entity within the system, and it is in fact actually Cassie and the Mimic which are being alerted to here, as Mixes is actually the antivirus software which is mentioned, and so this is a bit of a red herring, making us think that Mixes is in actual fact the threat when he is not. Continuing on, Cassie would enter the Superstar daycare after discovering a false wall which appeared to be a TV screen when she first looked at it, further emphasising the previous point that I have made about how illusion discs or some other technology are potentially being used to make barriers appear to exist to prevent people from using passages to enter certain areas of the Pizzaplex. And interestingly enough, both the AI system and the Mimic note how it appears that they don't seem to realise that there's a blockage there to begin with. Heading into the daycare section, we discover that due to the fact that there is now no lighting as the site is shut down, Sun is unable to escape from Moon, and so if we put on the mask, we discover that his programming is trapped in the AR environment, and he seeks to have the animatronic body reset in order to free him and merge with Moon to become Eclipse. Interestingly enough, Sun being in the AI environment would imply that Sun and Moon are connected to the network, however they are not used as a security node of any kind in keeping the Mimic at bay, as we literally just use the Faz wrench to reset them and nothing more. And we would also see at this point that the Mix's system is able to in some way trap Cassie and prevent her from being able to take off the mask, keeping her stuck in the virtual world. Moving into the daycare theatre, we discover that Gregory is shown on the screen being chased as Vanny, which we know to be footage from Security Breach, and it appears that this is potentially the Mimic sending this as a way to ensure that Cassie believes that Gregory is in fact there. We also discover that several of the glam rock endos are now in this site, and it appears based on hints that we get that they hate staring, which appears to be the opposite of what they did in Security Breach. So now we have to avoid looking at them to prevent them from activating. It is also discovered within the theatre that the room which appears to have been where Vanny was living during Security Breach appears now within the AR environment as perfectly tidied and organised, which may symbolise to us that if Vanny does indeed have a part in creating the virtual network to keep the Mimic at bay, then it shows us that she is indeed free of glitch trap now and has a perfectly cleared out mind. And as we know that Sun and Moon basically represented symbolism regarding Vanessa and her dark Vanny side, it would appear now that as we have reset Sun and Moon in order to become Eclipse, then it is entirely possible that this symbolises that Vanessa is indeed now at peace with her other dark side. And interestingly enough, there is an Easter egg where Eclipse appears on the roof of this room, which may symbolise that Vanny is indeed free. Using the AR environment to escape from the theatre, we discover a giant endo which appears in the screen of the theatre, and this may in fact be a purpose that the AR is intended for use as, as if you were in the cinema and you had augmented reality on, you could actually watch a film like this in 3D and have things come out of the screen. After climbing inside the giant endo, Cassie is instructed by the fake Helpy, aka the Mimic, in order to take the mask off to reveal that she is now in the ventilation system. And then she falls into the Monty Golf Gator Kart ride, which takes her on a ride that shows the company's preferred version of history regarding what happened to Bonnie and how Monty becomes part of the band. And so we see that Monty supposedly was his own stage show performance and idolised the glam rock gang, which included Roxy at this point. And then after a strange part where we see Bonnie off to the side hand the guitar to Monty, he is suddenly part of the group. And then we see Roxy also using her salon to style Monty. This does raise some questions, as we do see later that it appears that Bonnie's transition from the band was anything but peaceful. And as far as we can tell, Monty has an extremely aggressive side to him, which makes him seem to be the prime suspect for this. While in the Monty Golf section, we also discover that it appears possible for Cassie to basically teleport around the map. And my basic explanation for this would seem to be that as you need the technology of the mask in order to do this, plus you have the implant inside you messing with your head, it's entirely possible that by stepping through the transport gateways that we go through, that Cassie is in actual fact just traversing the Pizzaplex, but not remembering doing it, and so she appears to think that she is being teleported. We also see that the battle between Mixes and the Mimic is heating up, as we see that Mixes has begun to institute AR inhibitors in order to stop Cassie from accessing the network for the Mimic, which basically ejects you from the system. And the Mimic therefore decides to then start kicking Mixes out of the system, as we see when the golden wall of energy goes up on the walkway in order to kick Mixes out. The Mimic also pretends to be Gregory, trying to pretend to us that he is not in fact both characters speaking on screen at the same time. After eluding Chica and escaping from the Cupcake Bakery, which is located near Monty Golf, Cassie would then become trapped in the AR network while entering the server room area of the game. We never actually get to see this area of the Pizzaplex without the AR filter on it, as we are trapped the entire time within that system. However, the server rooms, based on the map that we have for security breach of the Pizzaplex, would seem to imply that the area Cassie traverses between the Cupcake Bakery and Roxy Raceway in some way takes her through either Rockstar Row or through the control hub area that we play in Security Breach. So the server rooms are located somewhere around that section. Upon reaching Roxy Raceway, we get told by who we believe is Gregory that he is hiding from Roxy and is nearby, but we know for a fact that earlier he claimed to be trapped in the sinkhole, and so this shows that the Mimic is lying, but Cassie does not pick up on this. We also get several hints in this area that the real Gregory is in actual fact trying to contact Cassie, as he claims in the ending of the game, as we see multiple things change within the game environment. The makeup sign appears to read "Wake Up," and we also sometimes, depending on whether or not we are wearing the AR mask, discover that certain things are different when it comes to audio, as there is a staff bot which repeatedly states "help," but when you wear the VR mask, it actually speaks in Gregory's voice to Cassie, which leads me to wonder if there are actually multiple versions of this which occur throughout the game which have not been picked up on yet, because multiple playthroughs are required to notice them. We can also see within the AR environment that cutouts exist like with the Monty ride, which depict the story of Cassie. She appears to show that Roxy is indeed her favourite character, and she styles her own style after her, and that we see that she also met Gregory at some point. And then after that we see missing posters of Gregory across the place, and then Cassie crying alone, showing that she indeed has some sort of connection to Gregory. It is also confirmed at this point that Chica is in actual fact part of the security network, as we see that after deactivating the security nodes for the area, she becomes deactivated. There is also an Easter egg at this point where it is discovered that if the player completes the Chica Feeding Frenzy game in the Cupcake Bakery, they are awarded Chica's voice box that we last saw in the possession of Glamrock Freddy in Security Breach, and this can be given back to Chica as a sort of present by Cassie. And then we get the newest mystery that Ruin has presented to us. The fact that within the Roxy Salon area, there's evidence that it used to be a different attraction, the Foxy Log Ride. Now this is curious, as we do see that at this point in time, Foxy is no longer one of the main characters for whatever reason, which is never disclosed in the series. So it's entirely possible that this unheard of log ride, which is not even mentioned in the books, may have had something to do with Foxy being replaced with Roxy. And another curious thing that I did notice at this point is that the log ride does still appear to have a lot of water pouring around inside of it. And what do we know is beneath this area of the Pizzaplex, the sinkhole. So it's entirely possible that the water from this ride may have actually helped to create, and even possibly is still expanding, the sinkhole beneath the Pizzaplex. And while climbing through the waters found at the bottom of this area, we discover that in order to defeat Monty here, he is ironically zapped by what appears to be a Glamrock Bonnie sign, potentially pointing to the fact that this is retribution for what happened to Glamrock Bonnie. Returning back to the surface, Cassie would be attacked by Roxy, and we discover that Roxy is in fact not possessed by the Glitch Trap virus anymore, and the new facial feature she has may in fact be installments placed by Vanessa in order to clue her into the Vanny network. As we see, when Cassie screams at Roxy to let her go, Roxy is startled and does so, implying that she is no longer an evil character. Upon restoring communications with the fake Gregory, it is revealed by him that something tunneled out of the facility and broke everything. Now, as we know this is in fact the Mimic, this implies that it did actually hear Gregory say this at some point in order to mimic this, and so something may have in fact actually tunneled out of the facility, which is strongly believed to be the Blob, and that would explain the earthquake that supposedly struck the Pizzaplex. Now, upon entering Bonnie Bowl, we discover that the mini Wind-Up Music Men prototypes have now been fully utilised as actual animatronics. Whether these have actually been released to the public is unclear, but it tells us that at least some time did in fact pass between Security Breach and Ruin in order for this to happen. We also see that they appear to be also linked into the Vanny network, and so it makes sense that Vanessa was the one in Security Breach who stole them from the security cabinet, which raises the question as to whether Vanny was truly the only one doing secretive stuff during Security Breach, or whether Vanessa had her own goals that she was doing. An interesting note is also the fact that the stage in Bonnie Bowl actually somewhat resembles the one that we see in the Princess Quest game, which leads towards the escape door, which allows Vanessa to be freed from Glitch Trap. And interestingly enough, by going through this stage, it leads us to a secret tunnel that leads us straight into the office in Blast, which is where the Princess Quest 3 game is, which allows us to do this. There is also a secret room which we can find in Bonnie Bowl, which is only unveiled after deactivating all of the wet floor sign robots. And interestingly enough, within this room is actually the remains of Glamrock Bonnie. And it is curious, as Glamrock Bonnie appears to have actually been killed here, and not as we assumed in the Monty Golf area. He also appears to have been bludgeoned with a bowling ball, and his chest cavity has been ripped open, similar to what happens to Freddy during the Vanny endings. Now, based on the available evidence that I have, I strongly believe that it is in fact Roxy, who was the one that killed Glamrock Bonnie. In the Monty ride, she's the only one who does not look happy and is looking sideways at Glamrock Bonnie. Also, the green paint on his stomach from where he was attacked matches the green that we see on Roxy's hands. And so it would appear that it perhaps is the case that Roxy replaced Bonnie with Monty because she was the odd one out in the band. Which leaves the slight issue of the security report stating that he went into Montigo. But interestingly, we have no indication of where this security report comes from. Is it a system that acknowledges where the animatronics are, or is it updated reports coming from the animatronics who have personalities and therefore are capable of lying? Now, it appears that Glamrock Bonnie is in fact still alive in some sense, as his eyes continue to glow until we deactivate every last one of the floor cleaning robots, which is curious to see as to what his software was actually doing then. So as Cassie travels through the vent to Blast, she is stuck in the AR network and travels through a vortex, and we see several items which may in fact imply to us that there is a connection between said items as we pass through this vortex. We see what appears to be a Monty, the Glitch Trap plush from Help Wanted, the floor cleaner robots, and the Phaser Blaster, all the while the Princess Quest theme is playing in the background. And eventually we end on Mixes, who is staring at us at the end of the tunnel before we enter Phaser Blast and find the Princess Quest 3 arcade with a large virtual sword sticking into it, implying that it was in fact conquered. Now, within Phaser Blast, we discover that the body of Glamrock Freddy appears to still be present in this area, which would imply that his true fate is one of the ones in which he is torn apart by the staff bots. We see the body is able to continue functioning without his head and activates when approached by Cassie. Now, interestingly enough, when putting on the mask, we discover that he completely vanishes from the VR network, and so it is implied then that this Glamrock Freddy body is not connected to the network at all, and so it is just acting on autonomous reactions, which would seem to imply that the head of the animatronic contains whatever connects into the network, and the bodies are also able to function under certain motor functions without the head present. There is also the slight curiosity of the fact that he has the word prototype written on his foot, which was not present in Security Breach. And although this has never been given an explanation, I do like that some theorists believe that it was simply painted over and that Glamrock Freddy, like all Glamrocks, are in fact prototype versions due to their advanced AI. Shortly after this, we would discover that Roxy is in actual fact the last security node of the network, and somehow she has conveniently become trapped under a vehicle in order for us to be able to deactivate her. But this is curious, as she does not stay this way for long, as she does show up later on at the end of the game. And so Cassie now heads down into the sinkhole beneath the Pizzaplex, which we'll cover in our next video, as we need to cross-reference what happens in Security Breach with what happens in Ruin to determine what exactly is going on in this mysterious pit beneath the Pizzaplex.